Hey, hello everyone. Welcome to the ComicBase Livestream. I am your host, Pete Bickford, and today we have kind of a special one planned. It's going to be uh, a relatively uncomfortable topic. It's all the default settings that we would suggest anyone who really wants to get the most out of their copy of ComicBase should change right away. It's uncomfortable because the obvious question it begs is, well, wait, didn't you guys design the default settings? So what the heck, people? Why are you telling us change these now? And the truth is that we want to help you get the most out of the program. And we'll get into like the theory of default settings in just a moment. But before I get into all that, I want to let everyone know, please like and subscribe so that you get notifications. Oh, also hit that bell icon so you get notifications of incredible new content like this. And if this is the sort of thing that you enjoy, please pass on to other folks and let them know to spread the word. All right. So anyway, first of all, before I get rolling, just want to say hey to everyone. Edwin first in the house here. You beat out Mark for once. Tim, good to see you. Winnebago, Illinois. It looks like finally everyone's going to break on the weather. It's really nice to see. It's beautiful out here in Franklin and Tennessee as well. Robbie, good to see you. Greg Heck, the mod is in the house, so spammers beware. And Fabian Van Drescha. Man, I hope I said your name somewhere near close to accurate. Great to see you. Well, Andre, great to see you. Jet City, yeah, welcome everyone. All right, so looks like that's Ed up there. All right, great. Well, I hope the sound's good and everything. I think we're about ready to roll. So before I just get into just a lot of screen sharing on everything, want to talk a little bit about just default settings and preferences and stuff like that. So a modern computer program will have dozens and dozens, with something like ComicBase, probably hundreds of little tiny settings that they come set a particular way. It could be everything from the size of a window to how it handles backups, things like that. And these are shown in various places in the program, most typically in something like called a preferences dialog, or some programs have preferences like whole sets of dialogues, and realistically, if you guys have ever used, something like, say, the VLC, video player, you can see that preferences can very, very quickly get completely out of hand to the point where no one knows what it all is happening with all the settings. And you can, I literally, when I tried to copy video settings from one computer to another, I spent about half an hour literally taking screenshots and going back and forth. You don't want that to happen to your program. You don't want to make it so complicated no one can do it. The whole art of setting preferences is having a decent set of defaults for the way the program works, and at the same time giving people enough customization in the program that they can work differently than you would otherwise work. Now, as a program designer, you do this in a couple different ways. The very obvious one is you'd have preference dialogues where you literally say, hey, here's all the weird flip it this way, flip it that way kind of switches in the program. But a really much more powerful way of handling preferences is typically just, hey, whenever we asked you how you like to do something, just remember it. You don't need to explicitly set a preference for it, but if you had checked a box in a certain dialogue, next time that dialogue comes up, just remember that they had checked the box last time, unless there's a good reason to leave the box checked. Same thing goes for like where they left the window setting, where they did things like that. Well, when when we set up preferences, we have to know as designers that whatever we choose for the default, the one that's there just to start the game off with, is going to be the one that the vast majority of our users is going to leave exactly where it was. So we really try to get the default thing so that is the program in its most useful and workable state. And there's basically three different considerations for how would we set this. One is we might want to set to the most common setting. In other words, most of our users will use a certain setting a certain way, and so we'll try to default it to that. We also might say, what's the most useful? The one that we found just from using the program a lot, this is the one that, hey, you might not know this originally, but this one's really a good setting. But more importantly, we are always bound by, we have to keep the safest setting. So if there's one setting that might be really useful and really common, but it destroys data or it might overwrite your data, we can never really default that way, because it's dangerous. You always want your whole program so it relies to safety. And occasionally those things get in each other's way. So that's why defaults are the way they are. And so let's talk about some of the things that we do in ComicBase and why you would want to set things to the defaults that they aren't. And for that, let's flip it over to ComicBase and let's get the show on the road. Oh, by the way, welcome to Xanadu Comics and anyone else who joined us late, but we got a lot to go through, so we're just going to start covering. All right, so one thing we realized a while back is that there's a number of defaults in the program. Let me go ahead and put myself on the screen here so I don't get completely lost in the shuffle. We realized there's a number of things in the program that we would always tell everyone who ever calls in for help, hey, yeah, definitely set this setting this way or this setting this way. But we only tell them that when we have a chance to actually explain the setting to them and why they should do it. If we hadn't had that conversation with them, we would do something like saying, well, we would just default it, to the safe setting and try to help people out. Well, we realized when we did ComicBase 2022 that, man, it's important to get a couple of these things right, and it would really help a lot of folks. So we actually introduced a wizard right when you start the program. It's called the Getting Started Wizard, and you can find it if you are past that part of things. If you go under Setup and just go to Getting Started right here, it'll pop it up. But let's go ahead and get that going. And what we try to do is we try to give you more of a discussion type of thing of why we really, really want you to do a couple of the most important settings the way we would suggest. So the first one is, we say, hey, look, this is why we'd like you to use the standard backup settings, which is, because we want to protect your data at all costs. So we want to default it to saving backups when you exit the program. It's going to save 5 of them. And then it'll start cycling over the last ones as you exit and close different times and so forth. We want to save them to the default place and so forth. That's the first thing we're basically trying to ask you. The second one, a little bit more controversial, but we think it's definitely worth it, which is to say, look, when you update your database, so when you download the weekly updates, we really want to be able to make corrections to data that either was incomplete or that we got wrong last time. Now, this is controversial because it's going to, if you say yes to that, you're saying that it's okay for us to overwrite certain of the data in your database. So we're trying to, at some length explain what it is we're really trying to do here, why it's really we're just trying to update our mistakes and things like that. And it's a really good idea for the vast majority of folks to go ahead and click yes for this. We couldn't default it this way unless we'd kind of had this little talk, but this is why we're definitely trying to encourage you. In a way, we're defaulting that the wizard would then default it to making the change we really wish we could have said in the program without the discussion. But because we're talking with you extra and trying to lead you through the process, we feel a little more justified in saying, all right, yeah, look, yeah, go do the standard update things. And then finally, we try to get you to use Sidekick and to have it set up your database for backups and things like that. Sidekick is the companion program that comes with ComicBase. Let me go ahead and pull it up here. It lives down by the clock area on your computer. Which unfortunately is not something I can show. Typically, you'd see it down here. There'd be a little arrow pointing up. Unfortunately, this is my alternate screen, and Windows 11 doesn't show that area on every screen. But if you click the little arrow pointing up and then go look for the superhero guy, that's Sidekick. It's a program that runs in the background, and it's there to do all the boring stuff on your computer. But some of the boring stuff it does is things like keeping your database up to date, posting things for sale if you sell on Atomic Avenue. Very importantly, backing up your database to the cloud, which also has the side effect of syncing up your mobile data. So it's an important program, and we want to have you use it. More importantly, we want to go ahead and say, hey, look, we would like you to back up your main database to it. And so what we're asking you in the main program here is, hey, this is what Sidekick does. Is it cool with you if we have Sidekick back up your main database? If so, then we add it to the list of databases Sidekick manages, and you go on your merry way. And then we give you the further tips to lead you through the help stuff, and there you go. Now, if you've done that, the program should be basically functional. It should do all the really important stuff, but not necessarily the stuff that I had experience lately of having to set up ComicBase on a new computer. It's not necessarily the stuff that I would do if I had it. And by the way, it's going to make me crazy because I want to shimmy over to meet my camera, so I'm going to move my camera over to me. Sorry, it's kind of square up on my monitor ahead of the show here, and I don't want to bother with some of the video settings, so I'm just taking the easy way out here. All right, so if you guys remembered last week's tech episode, I built a new computer, put ComicBase on it, and I was immediately thought, there's a bunch of stuff that every single time I install ComicBase on a new computer, I never use the defaults. So what are the things that I would tell, again, from one pro to another to you guys out there? What are the things that I would say, this is what I change every single time I use ComicBase, and you might want to give some thought to changing it yourself. Well, let's go through them. All right. So starting with, let's go ahead and okay. So we went through the updating things with backup. We went through setting up Sidekick. All right. So let's go to the preferences dialog itself. Let's go to the really obvious preference things, and I'm going to try now. Let's see if this works. If I set the zoom in, that is completely useless. But I'm going to try to go to preferences. That's really just not showing up particularly well. I may have to give up the zoomy bit here. Well, no, I guess it's semi okay. This is probably about as good as we've been able to make this sort of zoom feature happen. So let's let it roll for now. All right. So let's start at the top. So these are the default preferences in ComicBase. What would I change? All right. Well, the first thing I do is, so by default, it's going to want to check for updates once a week. The first thing I would do is, yeah, I'd go ahead and leave that alone there. But I would also, me personally, check for interim updates, which is to say, the release schedule here at ComicBase Centrals, we don't want to bore you with a lot of releases that aren't of general critical importance. So we only do a program update once a quarter that everyone is forced to do. But honestly, if you want to get every single little last thing that we've added, improved to the program between those quarterly releases, not a bad idea if you don't mind downloading updates more frequently, or at least being told about them. Not a bad idea to go ahead and check check for interim updates. I certainly do. All right, now we talked about the setting up your backups over here, automatically backup databases when you close the program. Number of backups 5, that's absolutely fine. But one thing I would also do is I would go ahead and check off this compress the backup files to save space. All right, why do I do this? What's the point of all this? The idea is the backups of when your database, when you get going, are going to be, exactly as big as the database itself, which these days means a little over a gigabyte in size. Now, that's not a big problem for most people's hard drives, but I like saving space when I can, and it doesn't, cost me any time. So if I go ahead and say compress backup files to save space, then the backup it'll do is it'll first save a copy of the database, but then if you're watching your computer very closely, you might notice that over the next minute or two, it shrinks down and creates a compressed version of that same database, and then deletes the full-sized backup. So we use a program called 7-zip. The zipped version of the compressed version of that backup file can be as little as a third of the space of the uncompressed one. So well worth doing, especially if you've got a more powerful computer that doesn't take a lot of time to do that. So I would, I personally always go ahead and check that one off. Save your backups the same folder as the original. That's all fine with me. I don't typically mess with that too much. Looking down some of these other ones down here, a lot of these are just really your preference. Do you like the sound effects up or down? Number of rows to display in the album views, I would go ahead and leave it as auto. What auto does is it goes ahead and figures out, basically, as you use the program, it figures out whether your program was able to bring back the results for titles in a reasonable amount of time. If it is, it tries to go a little bit higher. If it was taking too long to generate those pictures and so forth, it backs off the number of results it tries to bring back in a single page, and it more or less will calibrate the display of album views to your computer's own performance. I'd go ahead and leave that right where it is. Rows displaying grid view 5000 is fine. We'll talk more about that one in a nearby podcast for obvious reasons. That one's going to get really interesting, but leave it where it is for now. All right, standard cost 0. That's fine. Basically, what this is how much do you typically say when you enter a new comic book? Do you typically say that your cost of it was its cover price, was its current value? 0 tells me that I just didn't price it. And honestly, I've been doing ComicBase so long, and I have been not pricing my own comic books for so long on this one, keeping track of cost. I may as well leave it at 0. But you may very well want to go ahead and move that to at least cover price, so that if you buy most of your comic books new at a store, that's not a bad way to go to at least start getting a cost basis for your comics. All right. The item value change grid coloring. What this is all about is, you might have noticed that some of the rows in ComicBase are red or blue. Now, that's the default, is that, hot comics, this is almost borrowing from the Wizard's price guide. You'd make them red if they'd gone up in value, I think more than 15, 20% in the last year. And if they'd fallen in value, they would be blue, cold. And if they more or less maintained their value, they'd be black. I personally prefer the financial style coloring. It kind of uses the same sorts of thing that Robinhood does for your investments, where it gives you shades of red and green to give you an idea of how a more refined look of how your comic books are price changing. And then we'll talk about some of these other ones later on. One that's kind of important here is this one right down here: automatically download larger pictures when viewing items. This is a brand new feature for ComicBase 2022. If your internet access is good, if you've got a snappy internet, I would definitely check this, because what that lets you do, and this only applies to Archive Edition users, is it allows you to automatically have a larger version of the picture get downloaded, if one's available, from our website the second you go ahead and the second you're done with um, sorry, I'm trying to mix around the magnifier and talk at the same time, which is one step too far for me. What it does is, when you click on a picture initially, like right here, it will immediately load if we've got the larger picture from our web server. And what that lets you do is, it lets you very, very quickly load all the pictures in your Archive Edition by installing a single archive. While at the same time, any picture you actually interact with, you get the larger version. So it kind of gives you the best of both worlds. I would definitely say, absolutely, by all means, go for it, because this is as fast as it's taken to load these pictures when they're available. And you can see, like that one right there, there was no larger picture of the second or third printing of that one available. We only had a small one to work with. But all the other ones, yeah, they come back, as fast as you can click them, basically. So, yeah, good thing to do. I would definitely suggest doing it. It will save you a ton of time downloading Archive Edition pictures if you want. In the old days, I said, nah, don't bother with it. But for the newest editions, and particularly since we got the fiber set up on our server, I'd say definitely give it a shot and see if you like it. If it does, you will save yourself a lot of time. All right. So that's the preferences. Let's get on to some of the things that are a little bit more interesting. Now, let's imagine again that your scenario here is you just installed ComicBase on a new computer. You're starting out cold. And what are some of the things that I would do? Well, all right. The first thing I'd do is I'd look under the View menu here. And you'll notice that you've got different ways of viewing the different. Let me go ahead and try magnifying this in again. Yeah, okay, now that's going to make me crazy. Really trying to make this magnify thing work, but all right, let's back it off a bit. All right, hopefully this works. Hopefully you guys can see this. So you can view things as an album, which again, it's lovely. It's like a stamp collection view of things, or as a grid. Now, for the standard types of comic books and magazines, because we know you're typically going to have a lot of them, we go with grid because honestly, it's just faster. It's a faster to display type of thing. You can show more types of data. It's not as pretty, but it's not a bad way to go. Well, when we introduced books for ComicBase 2020, we also wanted to give people the idea of what the album view was for. And so we defaulted it so the default view of books, if you swing over to that, the books are going to default to this album view. If you like the album view, by all means, go for it. Leave it be. If you don't like the book view, or in particular, if you have a ton of books, then you might want to consider switching it back over to a grid view. And for me personally, that is what I do on my own on my own collection. Is I view everything in grid view. I mean, the album view is pretty, but again, like I say, I do myself like to be able to see as much data as possible at a time, and just the sheer fact that it's fast is a big thing for me. Now, another thing when you're looking at books is, let's go back to comics here just so I can show the difference. So if we look at the upper right hand corner here, let's go ahead and view this. Boy, this is of limited use, this little magnifier wedge here, but I'm trying to make this work with StreamYard, and I'm not sure how successful it is. But anyway, so when you're looking, let me go ahead and get out of it for the moment. So when you're looking at most of the collectible types, you'll notice that up in the upper right-hand corner, you've got a right arrow, a left arrow, and this is the titles button. It lets you choose which title to go to. And you can just go and click, from title to title and see the different things like that. Not a bad way of going when, again, with comic books, we know that you're typically going to have a lot of things and work on a title for a long period of time. Now, because books, again, we thought you're likely, at least when you start, to have less of them. And also, frankly, because we wanted to at least demonstrate to people that it could be done. Because we often got the request from people who have very small collections of, hey, why do I have to go title by title? Why can't I just see all my stuff in one big list? We said, well, all right, we'll show that off in books. So if you do have it set in your books, you can set it so that it displays everything as one big list of all the books you've got in stock, or you can display it title by title, like we go here. If you haven't done it beforehand, I would definitely say under grouping for books, if it's defaulting in your copy to display as a single list, if that is appropriate for the size of your collection, go ahead and leave it. But if it's not, switch it to the same thing we use for all the other titles, which is to say display title by title, just like that. So play around with that one, but I would say personally, that's one I always change to displaying it title by title. Viewing it as one big list is not particularly useful for me because, again, I don't have a very small collection where that would really shine, and it just gets thunky otherwise for me. So that's something I switch all immediately. All right, let's see what else we got here. All right, next thing I would do when I go to anything. Now, in ComicBase 2020, we introduced the concept of being able to choose which of these columns you actually have on screen. Let me go ahead and try this again. And all right, so I hope this is somewhat useful. I'm trying the magnifier here. It's really hard to use with StreamYard, but at least I can see it magnifies at least somewhat. I wish I could make the magnifier itself larger, but the window here. But anyway, so you see by default here we're going to show the whether it's got media, it will show its picture, its item number, its condition, quantity, cover, stock, currency, blah 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 blah, all the way up and down. All right, that's the default view. Now it may well be the case that this is not the most useful view for you. If that's the case, and let me go ahead and go out of that. Let's go up here to, let's see if we can get it to show. Go up to the setup menu and go to columns to view. And what that lets you do, as soon as I drag it onto my proper screen here, is it lets you say, all right, for comic books, do you want to, what are the titles you want to see? What are they set to, and so forth, in terms of, are they visible or not? What order they are in, and so forth. Now, there's also some presets over here. See, the default is, something called standard, or you can have standard, the custom field showing, or data entry, which shows most of the fields. Now, personally, I think the win here, if it were me, is to show as few things that I can on screen while still showing all the things I'm genuinely interested in. So what I would do is I would go ahead and start out by going to standard, and it's asking if I want to reset my columns with a standard setting. Go ahead and say yeah, but then go ahead and get rid of stuff, uncheck stuff, or move stuff around that just isn't particularly interesting to you. So I'm going to uncheck some of these picture file sizes and and things like that, and basically just try to like I said, I don't track my own costs, so I can go ahead and hide that one. I do care about the price, so forth, but try to get rid of things that aren't particularly interesting to you. Sometimes people show UPC codes, things like that. If that's cool to you, add it. If it isn't, lose it, would be my advice. And just make it, ideally, you want to get to a point where you can see everything you really care about like this without having to scroll left and right. That's usually where I'm happiest. And let me go ahead and zoom this up in your thing so you can actually see this left and right scroll bar. If I have to go left and right to see stuff I want, then it's too much work. So I will go ahead and I'll resize columns here. You can do that just by grabbing the little separator in between columns like this. You can make things wider, skinnier, whatever you like. The currency, for some reason, I think just because the word currency is very long, or is a very long word in many languages, that's a little wider than I would normally go with. But I would go ahead and size this grid up as much as I possibly could to make it so it's just really comfortable for me to work in. And then once that's done, you'll notice just your life just gets better. Now, one thing I would also say is worth noting is when we went to ComicBase 2020, first of all these settings for how it's displayed, the column view is actually stored in the database itself. So if you've got a database and you want, let's say I've got one database that is just comics I want to sell for my kid. I'm keeping them in consignment form. You might want to have a completely different column order just for that one particular database, maybe showing different custom fields that you wouldn't be interested in your own collection. So those settings are going to travel with the database. So go ahead and feel free to set those as you like for that particular, that particular thing. Those aren't ruled by the settings, but you can always, set them to their standards if you go under columns, set up columns to view, and then go ahead and reset back to that. That's not a bad way to go to zap them back to get started with. All right, let me do a quick check on the chat here. Oh, and Greg just reinforced the same comment in the chat here. Yes, comms to view is specific to the each copy of your database. All right, all right. So let's go and push on. All right. What's the next thing I do? If I have more than one database in my life, and I've definitely given this tip to a couple people this week, because for some reason this was the week of getting calls with database confusion. People who had made way too many copies of their own data, and then it gets very confusing about which one's got my current work in it. Which, by the way, I would not suggest doing. But if you do, for whatever reason, have to manage more than one database, the default one is going to come up with a theme called Blue Wave. I guess we thought it sounded good. And it's this kind of abstract pattern up here. The very first thing I would do if I had more than one database is I would go ahead and set the theme of one, if I have two databases, like for instance, I have a general one I'm showing to all you folks, and then I have my own database. And I go and set that. Oh, sorry, because I nuked the preferences right before the show. You can't see it. Let me go ahead and open that right now. And you will see the very first thing I do for my own comics is I made it so that the theme is green. Right? I still kept the wave because I think the wave is pretty groovy. But the whole idea is I want to make it so if I ever I'm doing sitting down doing my data entry for the day, that the very first thing I see is if it's green, that's really my database. If it's blue, it's something else. It's a different database, and so I won't get confused. If I just seeing that color switch is enough to tell me which one I'm working in. Let's go back to the one I'm doing my demo in, so you see what it looks like. Now, the way you set the theme, now let's see if I can get the magnifying going again here, is you come up here under File, scroll down to Theme, and then if you're me, you drag it onto the right monitor because you're trying to demo this for folks. All right. And then you choose your basic theme up here, so this is the wave theme. We have, grunge, simplistic, shimmer, but there's a whole bunch of them. Find something that speaks to your heart. And then choose a color that, again, speaks to your heart. But the main thing I would say in general, and you also, if you want to, you can set custom backgrounds for your books versus your magazines versus your comic books, etc. If that all works for you, go ahead and do it. Not strictly required, but if it's useful, hey, go for it. The main thing that is useful for me in terms of just preventing just confusion from hell is making sure that my working copy has something which is not blue. So, I mean, not that I don't love the color blue. It's just if it's not the default color, then I know I'm in my copy. I'm not in some other database. So that is a useful thing to do, at least for me. All right, let's go on some other things. Printing. All right, so when I go and I print anything, I am a big fan. Let's go under reports, and I'm going to go to say let's highlight a few things, and let's say we're going to print some divider labels for them. All right, so let's go. Let's put here. Let's put up the ID labels. All right. And first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to choose my actual printer. that can't be helped. That if you're printing, I don't know what your printer is. You just got to choose that one yourself. And then let's go ahead and set this to. I have a Dymo label writer that I use, and I always print on address labels when I'm doing ID labels. So that looks like that. The very first thing I do is, and I think we've actually set this so this is now the default, but if you had older preferences, it wouldn't have been your default, is to go ahead and print a barcode along with all of your labels. The idea for that, and let me go ahead and see if this is working on this machine. And of course, it's on the wrong monitor. Let's bring it over. Is when you print a given label, it will come with one of these. I'm going to see if I can get the full screen zooming going. No, that is absolutely useless. Anyway, so it will print a unique barcode for every item in your collection, whether your comic had a barcode on it before or not. And this one actually will take you to that exact record in your database. So if I'm ever wanting to, either add things to, I'm selling them using the point of sale terminal, or I just want to look them up, or I've been leaving comic books laying around. I just want to, see the data on them. I can always just beep in this barcode, and it'll take me exactly to that record in the database. Highly useful to have. I do it with everything I do. I would definitely suggest, if you've got the ability to have it always print, barcode labels when you print reports. Another thing, and well, actually, I'll get to the Dymos things in a bit. We have a set of kind of bonus tips that aren't really comic based, but they're really useful to know. And so I will talk a little bit about Dymo label writers at the end of that one. All right, let's go and add by barcode, and let's talk about a few things like that. So by add by barcode, and these are features that are all in the Pro and Archive editions. If you have an Express edition, don't worry about this one. It's not in your copy of the software, um, but we'll cover it anyway, and maybe we'll convince you to upgrade. All right, so if I go up under the items menu, I go add by barcode, or the fast way to get there is just say Control I. Oops, sorry, that was the point of sales terminal. So, all right. Oh, my bad. All right, add by barcode. All right, so this is what it looks like when I'm actually scanning in my own comics. Let me go ahead and just grab a set from behind me right now. Holding them up here, and yes, can we get the entire barcode action into the database here? So here's my handy dandy ComicBase wireless barcode scanner. So I'm just gonna, and hopefully you can see all this at once. Where are we at here? Did I manage to knock that one around? Yes, I did. My bad. Sorry. I also managed to hit my own microphone stand while I was doing it. That one actually did not come up. All right, we'll talk about that one later on. These might be too new for the database. All right, well, forgive those last two just for the moment. Well, we were doing good there for a second. All right, so when I'm scanning these guys in, the very first thing I do is look down at the bottom here, and let's see if I can bring this up with the lens again. All right, down at the bottom of this dialog here, we have display items after saving, which I would check, and print divider labels for new titles, which I also check. All right, what is that all about? What it is as soon as I get done adding these books to my database, and so I've got 4 in here, and when I hit save, it's going to add them to my database, so they'll be in stock. But remember, I really am a big believer in printing ID labels for everything, so it's then going to pull up the list of things I just added, so then I can do other things with them. I could select them all and say I want to quick change them, say that these are all in a certain box, for instance. I could, in my case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select them all, and I'm going to print ID labels for them. The other thing, that second dialog down here, divider labels for new issues, what that's all about is to make it so that if any of these are brand new titles in my collection, it'll automatically, before it does anything, print off the divider labels for that those particular titles, so that they will come off the roll, and I can stick them on a couple of new title dividers, and when I go to file them, I'll be ready to go, and I can do it all in one motion. All right, so let's go ahead and save those, add them to the database. All right, it added it, and it looks like we do have a couple of new titles. And right, because it's a brand. Sorry, I'm doing this in a brand new database. So all 4 of these are brand new titles, so it's going to print all those, and then it's also going to, okay, let's go ahead and print those. But you'll notice while it's printing those, we've also now got a list of here are the 4 titles I've just added, the 4 comics I just added. What I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight down these ones right down here, and then you can either right click and choose print divider labels, or pro tip on this one, just hit F6. And what it will do then is I can then print ID labels for all these new comics that I just added. So let's go ahead and get those printing, and I'll show you what those look like in here in just a second as soon as my computer's done. All right. Steve Dassinger wants to point out, yes, when you add by barcode, it's worth mentioning that what will be displayed is only because ComicBase, we can't mix and match item types within a list. It's only when it brings back that list of things that you did, it's, if they're all comics, no problem, but if you are doing books and comics and magazines for somehow, you're doing it all in one big batch, we only have the ability to bring back whatever the type of the first item was in that last search. We're looking at ways of finessing this in future editions of ComicBase, but if you have like a big bunch of comic books and one or two magazines, you might want to scan the magazines or the books separately, just to make the most of this capability, because we don't because books, magazines, and newspapers and so forth, because they all have different types of fields with them. We can't just add them into one ginormous list because they have different stuff. So it is limited. That's good tip there, Steve. Thanks for that. All right. Oh, and Age of Campus, remind everyone to smash the like button, share with all your geek nerd friends. Let's see here. And also says, when I print my labels, I don't get the number under the barcode. Yeah, that's so let me go ahead and show these on camera to the extent I can. So when you so these are the items in question. Only some of the labels bother to put the human readable portion underneath the barcode itself. We use a barcode format called codabar, which is relatively dense left to right. It's pretty tall though, and there's not a lot of room, and because it's not a superhuman readable number, we don't often repeat what the barcode means underneath the barcode itself. On many of the labels types, we don't essentially print the number twice, one in human readable form and one in barcode form. If you scan it, you'll get to the right place. I mean, don't worry, the barcode part does actually work, but I guess it is always nice when we can to print it in human readable format, just in case your barcode gets messed up. Definitely something we might want to look into and see if we can do some finessing in future editions, but it's not needed necessarily, but it might be nice to have. So that's a good point. Thanks for bringing that up. All right. Let me see what else we got. Okay, I think that's it for the comments for the moment. All right, let's get back to it. All right. And sorry, I want to show. And so this is what that all looks like here. Hopefully, it's about in focus. I told to print labels for both the front and the back of my title dividers, so that's why you see two of each of those as you go. And then, of course, I've got a big strip of the different barcode labels, and these, as we pointed out in a previous live stream, are going to come out in exactly the order that I scanned them. So if you've bagged and boarded them while you're waiting for it to print, and you just go getting ready to stick them on books as they come out, they should be exactly in the order that they're laying in the stack next to you. So you don't need to look at them too carefully, and you can just label them as quickly as possible. All right, let's move on. We had by barcode. All right, let's talk a little bit about grades. Now, I'm going to cop to this one a little bit. The title of this one is Things That I Change. And I'm going to say I don't actually change these on my particular copy. You might want to if your needs are different than mine, but I will say that I typically don't. I leave these alone. So if you go under the setup menu and you go down to grading, there's a couple of interesting things on that. Let me go ahead and bring that over so you can see it. All right, so first of all, I'll zoom out so we can see the dialogue as a whole. So here's the grading setup dialogue. Now, these are all the standard grades that come in with it. And I believe if you just start out by default, it comes in with the standard comic-based grades and then the CGC regular and restored grades, I believe is what is in the default package if you start out. But you also, depending on what you're doing, might want to come over here to this little icon that says grading sets, where you can choose other, if you use other types of grading services or different types of grading, if you do, slab books more extensively, you might want to go in and choose one or more of these to add to your database. So you might want to add the standard grades, the restored grades, PGX, magazines, what have you. Just go ahead and check off the ones that are interesting to you and lose the rest. I try to keep my grading list as smooth as possible, just with as few things showing it as I need to, because whenever you're looking through that dialogue, you always have to scroll down to pick your grade. So I try to limit to just the grades I actually use. So, but if you do use different grading services, go ahead and just check off those ones, and then that'll add them to your database. So just, all in one, fell swoop. You don't need to add them individually. All right. And then the other thing I would do is custom fields. Now, if you have the Pro, the Archive, or the Blu-ray Archive versions of ComicBase, you also have a feature called Custom Fields. And what these are for is it's for all the things we couldn't have imagined that you would want. It's basically we're never going to guess ahead of time all the things that people are going to want to do with ComicBase. And so what we did is we simply gave you a bunch of fields to use for whatever you want. I'm sorry, that's the columns view. Let me pull up the custom fields. This magnifier is hard to get used to, but I'm gonna try. There's the custom fields right down there. And of course, on the wrong screen one more time. All right. So what these are is on the title level, you've got three different checkboxes you can use for different things. Maybe it's titles that you're actively collecting. Maybe it's titles you want to get rid of. Maybe it's titles that I don't know, they're from a particular collection. What have you? We don't know. But as soon as you do know what you want to use them for, just go ahead and give these things names that are meaningful to you. So, for instance, custom check one, I'm going to say complete. I have as many of them as I want to have. And so if I check that off on a title, then it means that I'm done with it. For the item fields, these apply to every item in the database, not the title as a whole. A very popular one to do on this one is to put the box number as custom field number one or what have you. And so as you're going ahead and typing and you add books to your inventory, some people like say, all right, I just scanned in 240 books and I just rammed them all into box number 48. In which case you can just go ahead and do a quick change and highlight all the books you just added and set their box number. Check boxes over here, they can be, again, for anything you want. Is it something you had autographed? Is it something you want to get signed at the next convention? Is it a comic book that came to you from your uncle? I mean, it's whatever the whole thing is, make up the name for what it is, put it in there, and then as soon as you type in something like box number or complete or whatever else, you'll notice that in the different dialogues in ComicBase where they're referring to the different fields, you'll suddenly see that is an option that will appear for you. So when you're doing mass changes or quick changes or just editing the comic book in general, you'll see suddenly the box number will appear instead of the word custom field one. So go ahead and set those up if you use them. I say location number or box number is a very popular one that people use. I have large and theoretical reasons why I don't use it for my own collection and why you shouldn't either. But that's my, what, use the program the way you want. And at some point I will get down with boring everybody with a computer science theory of why organizing by box number is incredibly inefficient. But that's another broad podcast. All right. So I think that's it for the things that I always change in ComicBase itself. Now, there are a couple of things that come with ComicBase that I also change. The very first thing I do is I go to the screensaver, because the screensaver, if you have the archive edition, is just cool. So if you click here under Start and just type Screensaver, change Screensaver, there's a ComicBase cover gallery screensaver that comes with ComicBase, which is just neat. What it does is it will take all the pictures you've got loaded with ComicBase and allow you to cycle through them whenever your computer is essentially just, try and keep your screen from burning in. And you just get to see just dazzling numbers of comics from around the world. And it's very cool. So this is what that looks like. I'll just go ahead and preview it right now. So yes, I'm showing a screensaver during a ComicBase podcast. This is great TV, is it not? All right. So that's what the general idea of what that looks like. Let's go into the settings, though, and let's make this better. All right. So if I go under settings, first of all, you can go ahead and say which media you want to show you. You can say comics, you can say everything, and so forth. You can say whether or not you want right now I've set to exclude mature titles because I didn't want to demo this thing and have something come up that I was going to get banned on YouTube from. But you can include them if you want, if that's your thing, whatever. Or honestly, you go and say I want nothing but mature titles because that's how I roll. You also can say how fast it goes. The one that I would definitely do, and I believe this did not used to be, I think it's the preference now, but I think it did not used to be, is to automatically show covers of show large covers full screen. So in other words, if as you're going through this, it figures out that you've got a larger comic book cover, something over, I think, about 800 pixels tall. It will actually, instead of going that tile by tile view that you saw later on, it'll actually go ahead and bring those out full size and feature them and let them hang on screen for a while. That is definitely, if you've got the larger pictures, definitely the way to go. at least in my aesthetic opinion. Have a look at that one, see what you think. All right. That's the screensaver. The other program that comes with ComicBase that is really important and you should definitely give a look at is Sidekick. So let's go back to him. All right. Once again, you pull up Sidekick. He lives down by the clock area in ComicBase. Typically, you see the little arrow pointing up down here at the bottom. Click on the guy. It looks like a superhero. Choose open, and you'll see his interface. All right. Now, if you've gone through the getting started portion, he'll be set up to do the basic stuff for you, and to do it in the middle of the night. He will, he'll check for updates every day. He'll try to save your backup to the cloud once a week. He'll, do all the basic stuff, things that he will not do by default. By default, he's not going to try to post any items for sale to Atomic Avenue, even if you had them marked as for sale. If you sell on Atomic Avenue, you will probably want to change that. But certainly, this is one of those things where the safest setting is the one that we're going to go with, because even if you were somehow crazy enough to say, I want to mark this as for sale, we're not going to make ComicBase so that, first of all, that's not the default in ComicBase, but we're not going to default Sidekick to then post those for sale to an online store, because there were people, especially I think in the early days of ComicBase, when it wasn't very well understood what the different features for selling were all about. There were people who would say, market for sale. Like, yeah, I might want to sell it someday. So they'd go and mass change all their stuff as for sale. And then Sidekick came out, and which is an automated program to do your standard things in the middle of the night. And I think in the very, very first version of Sidekick, it was like, well, hey, if you marked it for sale, of course you'll want to post your stuff and keep your store updated, right? That lasted for about 6 months before we started getting all these, queries from people who, again, for whatever reason, had marked all their books as for sale. And then suddenly we're amazed. It's like, wait, what do you mean these are all posted for sale in my store? Well, okay. So this hasn't been the case probably for a decade. But anyway, that's why the settings are the way they are right now, where they do neither of those things. But if you do sell on Atomic Avenue, I would definitely suggest that you do mark it so that it keeps your store synchronized and updated, because it's very convenient. Don't do it if you don't sell. Just leave the defaults alone. One thing I would do, regardless of what you do on Atomic Avenue, is I would go up in here under the settings, and the settings on Sidekick are found here under this little gear icon in the upper right hand corner. Go ahead and click on him, and go ahead and have a look at the schedule first thing off here. Now, by default, the schedule is going to be set to try to do things, it's going to check for updates daily. We only post an update once a week typically, but check every night to see when the update comes out. Check and post sales, never. Save to the cloud weekly, right? Weekly is fine. That's more than enough for most people. It's a pretty good balance between how big these files are you're transmitting up and what most people's internet speed is. Compacting the database is weekly. Didn't used to be. No, matter of fact, I'm going to get into this one in just a sec. I want to talk about this one. You can leave it weekly, or honestly, you could just turn it off. This used to be something that was very important to do, and now, honestly, it gets done enough. Just anytime you save to cloud, it's going to compact your database anyway, so it's typically redundant. But also, with ComicBase prior to 2020, compacting your database is something that just had to be done. It was very, very important, and it took a fair amount of time. And so having Sidekick do it was a good idea. Nowadays, honestly, you can take it or leave it. It isn't going to make a lick of difference to most people's lives. So if you want to set that to never, I would certainly not fault you. And when you're done, go ahead and hit save. But the other thing I would do is, by default, it's going to want to do these things in the middle of the night. So here, 1 a.m. in the morning. All right. This is a good time for you to think about how you use your computer. If you use your computer like I use a desktop and I leave it on all day, then Sidekick works great for me, because what it does is at a certain point at night, I will knock off. I'll, go downstairs, hang out with, family, have beer, have dinner, whatever. And even if I'm working late at night, by 3 a.m., I'm pretty much done, unless things are going very, very badly in my life. But anyway, so if you set this thing to run in the middle of the night, what I will find in the morning is, if I've just exited ComicBase and I come back in the morning, that if anything needed to be done, like if an update had gotten posted overnight, it will have downloaded the update, it will have saved my backup to the cloud, it'll have done all this stuff like magic. And just, and it works perfectly for me. Now, it works perfectly because I know when I stop working for the night, and because I leave my computer on. Now, If those things aren't true for you, one thing is if you use a laptop and you're used to shutting it off, then I would say actually turn off the schedule. I'd say turn all of these to never, because otherwise, what will typically happen is it will want to be doing its work in the middle of the night by default. If you don't give it a chance to do its work in the middle of the night, it doesn't help you any. And worst case, depending on how things go, is it'll stack up the work that it wanted to do and try to do it at some point when it senses you're not using ComicBase when you were just about to use ComicBase in the middle of the daytime. Now, the schedule used to slide around a lot more than it does now. Nowadays, we try to honor your time of day setting pretty religiously, but depending on when you had initially set things up and and so forth, you might have it set so that it's trying to back up your databases at 2 in the afternoon or something like that. Do check it over, compare it with how you actually use your computer, and adjust accordingly. I would typically say for most people, set it so it does its stuff at 3 in the morning if you leave your machine on. If you don't leave your machine on, turn off the schedule. It's not helping. You can always kick these processes off manually, but it's if you don't give your computer at least occasionally a chance to do this work when you're not working, then it's not helping any. So I would just go ahead and turn that off. All right. All right, let me check. Let's see. MJ Castaneda says, oh, if let's see here. Mark says, if you decide to use the custom fields, remember to use the set menu columns to view to activate and display the column fields in grid view. Yes, that's a good point. If you are using the custom fields over here, by default, if you're using just the standard columns to view, it doesn't include the custom ones by default. So you can either say show the standard plus custom fields, in which case it will show them, or if you just use one or two of them, you might want to scroll down here. Like I just gone and set the box number over here. So let's go ahead. See box number on there. Like go and zoom in on it. Let's see if I can get that to show up. There's the box number, which is replacing my custom field 1 you'll see over here. I'm just go ahead and check him off, and then box number will appear in my list. And I can move him up or down as I want in the column order as well. All right. And scrolling over here, and there is my box number at the far right. Okay, cool. All right. So that is that. We talked about Sidekick. We talked about Screensaver. Last note I had to myself is, all right, if you sell on Atomic Avenue, so everything I've told you largely applies to if you don't sell on Atomic Avenue. If you do sell on Atomic Avenue, there are count them, 4 things that I would do differently. First thing, I would come up here under Setup, and let's go ahead and make this larger so we can see it. I'd come up under Setup, go to Preferences, and all right. If you're the type of person who wants to sell everything in their collection, then what I would do is I'd check this item right down here of mark new items as for sale. And what that does is whenever I add something new to my collection, its default is that it will get checked off as for sale, and I won't need to check that manually. It saves you a ton of time as far as deciding things over. Now, only set that if by default everything that you've got in this collection, if someone offered you the price that you're asking for, that you would take it. If your default is not that, then don't use that setting. I guess super pro tip on that one. There is another setting in ComicBase called reserve quantity, which, for instance, for most things in my collection, if you offered me what I'm asking on, as my asking price for them, I would happily ship it off to you. There's some things that you can only have them if I have duplicates. So for instance, I really, really, really like my EC archives. And so I will go to my EC archives and I'll say, set the reserve quantity on all my EC archives to be 1, which means no matter what happens, I won't sell it if it's the last copy I've got. I'm keeping 1 in stock no matter what. If I have 2, which I actually do have of certain of them, I'll sell you the second one, but I won't sell you the first one. So that's another way you can go on that. If you guys have questions on how all that works, please follow up on the whole thing. This can get a little confusing, I will certainly admit. All right, so first thing I do if I sold online is I would go ahead and mark new items as being for sale if the general thought is that things that I add to my collection are for the purpose of selling them. I would definitely go ahead and go under the preferences again, and let's go down here, and for that second one down here, check for new sales and purchases. I would change that from never to every time the program is launched. Because the idea is every time I launch this thing, I want to know what I sold. I want to get an alert for it. I want to have it knocked out of my inventory, and also, I want to get that rolling. As soon as possible. Now, Sidekick will also tell you. Will also you can set its preferences to knock things out of your sales, knock things out of your inventory when you sell. Not a bad idea as well. Go ahead and set Sidekick's preferences. Do that if you like. But I certainly like getting the notices of my sales every time I launch the ComicBase because it's nice. It's like you launch ComicBase and says, "Hey, you just sold 15 new things." Um, all right, so let's go ahead and do that. Other things that I would do. So I do set Sidekick up. I change Sidekick schedule so that he automatically is set to post my items for sale. So as soon as I add something new to my inventory, when Sidekick runs that night at 3 in the morning, it'll update my online inventory automatically. And the last thing I do, this isn't really a preference, but it's worth knowing about, is because in my particular database, anything I've got, the rule in this database is if I've got it and you'll pay me my asking price, you can have it. Is I actually go and say, I do a mass change and I say, everything in my database is for sale. So I will go up under the edit menu and is it edit or items? I always get this mix. I'm sorry, the items menu. Sorry, it's very hard to see with this. Um, Go down to mass change right over here, or just hit Control M, and then set. Sorry, let's back this out so you can see it. This is what mass change is for. Is it's to let you make changes across vast swaths of the database all at once. What I would do in this particular case is I'd go to under comic books, change, and then it says, what do you want to change? I would change the for sale field. Let's scroll down right there. And then you say you could change it to either the setting. You can change it to either the value of another field, or in my case, I'm going to say the value is going to be set to is checked. So if we back out and so you can see what I'm doing, what I'm saying is across all of comics, I'm saying for sale is checked. And I'm going to do it to all titles. You can do it for select titles if you want, but I'm just going to say everything goes. And if you do that, it only takes a second, but when the net effect of that is it's going to say everything I've got is marked as for sale, and I don't need to check individually all those jillions of boxes you see down here on the right. Those will all just automatically get checked. All right, that is that. Let's see. Tim asks, ComicBase TV, is there a way to get to your top gainers and losers and see what's new from someplace other than the internet? Check the price for updates. Yeah, sure. There's a there's a top gainers and losers report right here under the report menu. And it's just report top gainers and losers. And this will give you what went up, what went down in the last update. And you can choose, how many items to show and whether you want to see it by the biggest gainers, by value, by percentage, etc. Yeah. So it's just a report, top gainers and losers report will get you there. All right. All right. So, all right. Lastly, and I'm actually going to do okay for time, unbelievably. Okay. So that is things I do if I'm selling on Atomic Avenue. Now, there's optional. This isn't a preference, but this is maintenance. I will try to do at least once. I don't say do this all the time, but I would say you couldn't hurt yourself if you did this at least once when you use the program. And it's a good thing to do. Some of the stuff takes a while to run. Do it when you're not busy. You don't need to do it all the time, but do it like once. Come up under here to the File menu. And whoops, I'm going to put that into lens mode again. Not sure how great the lens mode is, but it's better than the full screen mode when you've got multiple screens. But so we're trying. Go down to File, scroll down to File Tools, and you'll see a dialog, which if I bring it onto that other screen, you'll be able to see it down here. Looks like this. It's got a number of things. You can optimize the database, which we already talked about is now largely useless. You can reset the preferences, how I prepared for the show. You can look for databases. You can install pictures. The one we care about right here is called Rebuild Lists. And what this will let you do is it lets you say, look, I want to rebuild all the information about the series, which series I've got, the item information, and then a list of the contributors, the things that appear under the find list for the writers and artists, and the pictures list. And I'm going to go ahead and check them all. Now, why am I doing any of this stuff? So what this is all about really is to go and recompute all the recomputable things in the database. So, for instance, with series information, it'll say like, let's say you entered a series called, Captain America, comma the. Well, there's a display field which would then appear on labels called, which would then say call the Captain America, or the, the Apocalypse, comma the would be the Apocalypse. There, it will go ahead and compute which titles you've got in stock, because it'll count up your inventory and mark things as in stock or out of stock if somehow that setting got off. The item information tends to be where most of the action is, because what that'll do is it'll grind through every item in your database and figure out. It'll do a lot of checking over your notes and things like that. It'll try to remove things that are completely redundant. So, for instance, if you said 1: Captain America, semicolon, first appearance of Captain America, it will get rid of the one that's 1: Captain America, because it's redundant. It will recompute if you've gone and changed any of your grading percentages. It'll recompute your pricing, things like that. But it'll do as much cleanup as it possibly can on the notes without being controversial and destroying things. The one down here that's really good, though, to do once and do it when you've got some time, is this one at the very bottom, the pictures list. And it warns you, this is slow. Typically, this will take a few hours to run if you've got the archive edition with everything installed. But what it will do is it will go to every picture in your database and figure out, all right, have you got a picture for this particular item? If so, open up that picture, see how big the picture is, and recompute its dimensions. So it knows that this thing is a certain number of pixels tall and a certain pixels wide. And the fact that it went and it did all that pre-screening, all this stuff, what it does, two things. One is it makes it so all your grids draw slightly faster, because they will know ahead of time which ones have pictures. They don't have to go looking picture by picture, because it'll know where most of them are ahead of time. It will also load your things. If you've got it set to automatically grab larger pictures, it'll make sure you've got the current dimensions loaded in there, so it knows to go and grab them. It doesn't have to recompute that. And finally, it will load up the screensaver with all the right picture data, so that when the screensaver is looking for pictures to show, it knows where the big ones are, it knows where everything else is, and it's able to show you more pictures as a result. If you don't do this, what the screensaver will do when you first run it is it will try to read through your first 10,000 entries or so, because it wants to have enough pictures to make it interesting, and then it'll try to grind it bit by bit. But if you've got the full list pre-computed, then it'll take the vast swath of your database. So it does take a couple, 3 hours to do this one. It is optional, but it does make everything just a little bit better. So it's worth doing that maintenance step once. Don't do it all the time unless you're feeling really OCD, but do it once. All right. Things I don't recommend changing. So now we've had the things that I would change. There's things I'd maintain. Here's things that I would say, man, unless you've got a really strong reason to, don't change this. Mostly because they tend to be the things that result in tech support calls for us. Don't change the database name unless you need to. Now, the default database when you start it up is going to be called something like ComicBase database, or if you have a newer one, My Collection. This is not the most inspired name. We know this. We don't know that your name is Gary ahead of time. Otherwise, we might have called it Gary's Collection, or Steve's Collection, or Andrea's Collection. We don't know, and so we had the pleasure of meeting you. We didn't know your name. Otherwise, we did what we could. What a lot of people will do, and this is a mistake, is they'll take the stock database, ComicBase database, and at some point they'll say, I don't know, I want to make this Pete's new database, because I'm feeling like there's a change in the air. I've had some, I want to separate it somehow from the old same things, or maybe I just want to put my name on it. Pete's database is opposed to ComicBase database, and so then they will go up under the file menu. They will say save a copy, and they'll save Pete's database. Okay, so far not so bad, but where that tends to go, and this is why I kind of bang down about hey, if you are going to have more than one database, change the theme of one or the other. If you've gone and made a separate copy of your database, you see over here, I've got a stock ComicBase database over here. I've got the Livestream one, which is the one I beat up, for your viewing pleasure on these things. I've got a master database, which we use for our own production. I've got the old database I had from way back when, which I use for testing and so forth. And if you look at all these ones, if I were to open them all up, you would see that they're all separate colors. They're all separate colors because Even in me, the guy who wrote the dang program got confused at some point in his life and wasted an hour or 2 of time entering data into the wrong database, which then I went, "Ah, dang it," because I'd open up the right database at some future date, and I'd wonder where all my data was, and the answer was, "Well, you put it in the wrong database, you idiot." So, yeah, I'd say, look, just don't set yourself up for failure on this one unless you really know, that you're doing it intentionally. Don't have more than one database if you don't need more than one database, and if you do, keep it this default name, because if all else fails, if you reset your preferences, if you forget, where you stored anything, it'll always look for a file called ComicBase database inside the ComicBase databases folder whenever it launches the program. And if you nuke everything else, that's the one that's going to come back to you. So every call that we ever gotten on the tech support line that starts with, "I spent 5 years entering all my data and now it's all gone. What did you jerks do to me?" It all amounts at the end to, I was entering it in one database and then suddenly I opened a different database and I don't see my work. I mean, that's where that all starts. So let's lower everyone's, let's all add to the chill of the universe just in general, and don't make multiple databases unless you need to. One thing also a lot of people don't notice, because they're used to working with things like spreadsheets and word processors, is items in a database are saved the moment you exit the field. So I mean, if you type something and you just go to the next field, or you hit save, or whatever else you do in the dialog you're in, that data is saved and written to disk. It's done. You don't need to do anything else to save that data. So don't make copies of your database. Don't do file save a copy and make 87 copies. Well, I want to have Tuesday's work. We've had folks do that, and it doesn't end well. So yeah, just launch the program. It'll open the database. Do your work. X the program. It'll make a copy. It'll save your work. You're good, unless you got something special going on. But don't add grief to your life if you don't have to. All right. And then the other thing I'd say is, don't save the database anywhere other than the default location, unless. All right. What's the unless here? So when I say the default location, what am I talking about? By default, your database is going to be called ComicBase database. It's going to be saved inside your personal documents folder, which is to say C/users/your name /documents/human computing/ComicBase databases, and then it'll be called ComicBase database.cbdb. Right? That's where the ComicBase database file wants to live. And when it goes and it looks for databases, the very first folder it's ever going to look for is that same ComicBase databases folder. So everything gets a little easier if you leave it where it was. If you move it someplace else, it's up to you. You got to remember where you put it. I mean, ComicBase will try to remember, but if you ever zap the preferences or rejigger files on your hard disk and things like that, at some point it might say, "Whoa, I don't see it anymore," and it'll take it out of your recent list, and then it's up to you to go find it. Again, don't make more hassle for yourself than you need to make if you can. Unless, all right. So here's what unless equals. Unless one of two things. One, if your main hard drive, the one that has your documents on it, is a slow old hard drive, like a mechanical hard drive, and you have some new fancy zippy SSD, a solid state drive that's someplace else. So if for some reason, like you start out with a really old laptop, but you upgrade it and you added like an external lightning fast SSD drive, then I think there's a solid case to be made for locating your ComicBase database over on that SSD, because SSDs make a huge difference in the performance. And then the other one I'd say in the unless is, if you had the misfortune of having Microsoft or Dell or somebody pre-install Microsoft OneDrive on your machine, and they do it in different ways, but one of the more obnoxious ways it sometimes comes pre-installed is in a way where they've kidnapped your documents folder. If you look at the C users, your name, documents folder, you'll notice that everything in there is not really in the documents folder. It's really in the /OneDrive/documents folder, because they've auto redirected that folder into OneDrive. If that happens to you, we'll actually bark at you, just because it sets you up for another set of grief involving, OneDrive trying to sync your database every time you touch it at all, which is really a pain in the tuchus. ComicBase will, if it sees that you've got that kind of remapped directory structure in your whole thing, and that your ComicBase database is living somewhere within a OneDrive redirected file, we'll say, "Hey, whoa, hey, this is bad. Here's why it's bad. And is it okay if we move your database over to the public documents folder?" Which, at least till now, OneDrive has not been stupid and arrogant enough to want to try to redirect to OneDrive. At least we've never seen it happen. So if you do that, say yes, in which case we'll take your ComicBase database, move it into public documents / human computing / ComicBase databases, and it'll open from there. That's the one time I'd say that's worth, moving the directory, is if you have OneDrive on your machine, it's kidnapped your documents. But anyway, that's the things. Those are the two things I would not do. I would not change the standard database, and I wouldn't change the standard database location. Asterisk, unless you have a good reason. In which case, it's your computer. Do what you want. All right. Last power pro tips for this whole thing, and then I'm gonna go have a beer because I'm getting tired and I can't talk. Things I always change on my machine. I'm always showing these as tech tips to people. Because I realize that having put a new machine together, this is not the way the machine comes these days, and man, it's better when it does. All right, so let me go ahead and start with the first one. I'm just gonna. This is really just a Windows tip, but I'm gonna drag my stuff over to the main drive. Wait, here. Here, let me drag this stuff onto the main window so you can kind of see, the things I'm talking about. On every computer I've ever worked with, happily, it is so darned useful to have the icon for the computer itself on your desktop, because it gives you a place in the upper left-hand corner. And this computer is called Valiant. Yes, all my computers are named after comic book publishing companies. The last one was Adventure. And I've had Image, Dark Horse, DC, Marvel, you name it, all the way through my computer's history. Anyway, and yes, so if you have your computer icon in the upper left-hand corner like this, you got 2 clicks. Will show you all your drives. Very, very useful. If you right-click on it, you can instantly go up to the system properties, which of course is on the other screen, but that gets you all this stuff. It's a great, great way of just navigating around your machine. It makes everything faster. Now, this used to be the default in Windows. They changed it a while back because I don't know what's going on in Microsoft. But they thought, oh, no, let's declutter their desktop like those Apple guys or something and take away the single easiest way to move around your own computer. And so anyway, to put it back, thank God they found a way to putting it back. It used to be you could just right-click on the desktop and say show desktop icons. Now they've buried it, but good. The way you get to where they've buried it now, and it gets more buried every version of Windows, click on the Start menu, type Themes, and Related Settings. Yes, this is one of those related settings. Click on that. It's going to bring this up. You say, okay, well, that's lovely. I got a Fallout guy over here. I got a bunch of desktop there. And here's the one we're looking for right down here. Desktop icon settings. Click on this, and it takes you to a really, really old school looking dialog that looks like this, where you can say, yeah, show me my computer. Just check it to say yes. Check, you can say whether or not, if you're on a local network, it's a decent idea to have the network here so you can double click and see all the other computers on your network and share files. The recycle bin is going to be on by default. I don't find the others particularly useful myself, but definitely, yeah, go ahead and put the computer up there. Swear to God, you'll thank me for it. All right. If you've got Windows 11, the very first question I would ask anyone with Windows 11 is, did you like your icons in the bottom center? Oh, let me go ahead and hide Tim's thing on here because I think I've clicked on, you can't see what he's going on. I'd say, do you like your icons in the bottom center? Which I think I went to the Fitz Law discussion with a previous live stream. Basically, it makes it really much more difficult to locate anything if first of all, if they're going to swap positions left and right, a fair amount, but also when you don't have a fixed target on that most important element in the whole interface, which is to say the Start menu. If the Start menu is always bottom left, then I can be as reckless with the mouse as I want, and it's always going to be right there. I don't need to say, well, is it over this one or that one or that one or that one? It's just wham to the bottom left, and I'm there. Anyway, I would strongly suggest you just try it, or for most people, I'd say a better alternative is put your taskbar so it's the way it always was. It's left-centered. The way you get there is you right-click on the Windows 11 taskbar, you go to Taskbar Settings, and go to Taskbar Behaviors down here at the bottom. And then Taskbar Alignment, the default would have been center, switch it over to left, and suddenly you got your old taskbar back, and life gets better. All right, and then the last tip I had here for things that I always do on a new computer is, because I use a Dymo label writer, there aren't any print preferences in ComicBase or that they normally expose to programs to let you use the higher quality settings on the labels. Which, if you're going to print pictures, if you're going to print barcodes on them, darn, it's good to have. I mean, fast is nice, but really good looking type and really good looking pictures and barcodes are more important, or at least to me. I mean, I can wait the extra 5 seconds for a strip of labels to pop out. And the way you get to that one is you go to your printers, and I have a bunch of them. But here's my label writer 450 twin turbo. Go to the printing properties of that printer over here, and I'll see if I can zoom this in so you can see what I'm adjusting here. All right, zoom it up. Come on. All right. So if you come down here, and I believe it is all right. So you see the maximum resolution 600 dpi. All right, this is go to the preferences dialog right here, and here's where you can set the print quality. And sorry, I got to zoom out just so I can see myself what I'm doing. So if you go click on the paper/quality tab, this was
paper/quality.
Yeah, thanks for that. Paper/quality. All right, then you got a choice here to choose. You can choose best. That's not bad. Normal, custom. And where I went with in this particular case, I went under advanced. I did tell you they buried this pretty good. And what I did is you go down to printer quality right here for barcodes and graphics. The default's going to be text only. And at that point, then you can also say, the half toning is photo quality as opposed to 8x8 dithering, which makes all the cover images look a little chunky. And you're going to wind up with a print quality of 300 by 600 inches right here. For some reason, that comes off as a custom one as opposed to best. I think best wants to swap. There's something about yeah. Well, one of these things is slightly different than if you just clicked best. But in my own testing, those are the three I changes. I change it so print quality is barcodes and graphics. Print quality is 300 by 600 DPI down here, and the half toning is photo quality. If you do that, then you wind up with graphics that, again, it's the main limit at that point is that you're still printing to a black and white printer. So every pixel on it can only be black or white. It can't even, I mean, the way you get gray is by having some black and some white next to each other. You can't have a gray dot. Unfortunately, it's not a color printer. But if you do have that, you'll notice the text on your labels looks way better. Matter of fact, just everything just looks better. It does take a little longer to print, but I'm going to argue worth it. And oh, awesome! I just lost my keying. Let's see if I can restore that. That's okay. We're about the end of the show anyway. All right, come on back to me. Switch off the key. There we go. All right, guys. That was about it. And Company Man joins us here. Let's see here. Link Fist, so it works each week. List all the changes. Okay. Oh yeah. So the question came up about the changes on the ComicBase homepage for the most recently posted content updates. Yeah. So what happened with that one is, let me look into that one. What would typically happen on that one is, in order for it to display, it had to be a .asp link in order to. So what we're talking about is there's a little report that comes out on the website with the update every week, which tells you everything that's changed. And in order to keep it so it stayed within the web structure of the overall site, we had to put up as a .asp file instead of a straight HTML file. And that was great so long as we didn't exceed a certain amount of content in the file, which I don't believe is documented anywhere, but I think it comes down to if we pushed, if one of these crazy weeks where we have 50,000 changes to issues and prices, the .asp file goes error 500 on you. It just says, whoa, I'm classic ASP. I didn't know it was going to be that big, and it just blows up. So the file becomes unusable, and then we have to note it and then hand edit the file to say there were a lot of changes here. We can't show them to you, and then move it back. I think this is one of those like kind of like operations things that we'll try to fix, in the coming weeks, months, as after we get done with some other heavy lifting that we're doing behind the scenes here, because it is annoying and we get annoyed by it as well, and no one likes to have to do the hand edit job on that one. We may have to just write out as a standard HTML file. We'll see what we can do. The overall problem we're facing really is we're just pushing too much content. Um, it was one of the things I'm planning on doing. Because we're actually rounding the corner on our 30th year. Christmas will be our 30th anniversary of doing ComicBase. Is I want to do a retrospective of how big the initial ComicBase was, how when we first started doing content updates over the web, what was our typical weekly content update, and it would typically be like a few hundred price changes, and nowadays we have weeks where, like, pushing 65,000 price changes for like a medium week for us. So it's staggering how much data we're pushing these days, and how much content we're dealing with. But some of the things that worked out just great for a decade or more the way they used to work, suddenly just, "Oh, okay, we discovered a file format limit on that little report, so I guess we'll have to work around that." So yeah, we'll look into that one. It's a fair point. All right. All right, hate to compliment, man, and enjoy that beer peer. Have a great night. And on that note, I am going to be out of here, guys. Thank you. I hope some of this was helpful. We do these roundup shows every once in a while. Definitely would appreciate your comments to say, like, did you learn anything that you didn't know beforehand? Or was all just kind of like, and was the content too weird, too advanced, too just stuff you already knew? Let us know, because we care, and we want to try and make these stuff interesting to you. Next time out, we'll probably have something very interesting to talk about that we're not quite there yet, but we're looking forward to it, and I for one am psyched. Anyway, guys, we'll see you next time. Take care. Bye bye.